Welcome, everybody, to another brand new episode of It's My Wrestling Podcast. I'm, of course, as always, your host, Chris Dees. Before I get started, please make sure you hit the subscribe button if you're watching this on YouTube, or the follow button wherever you're listening on audio platforms. Today's guest is a man I'm really excited to talk to. I know a lot of podcasts say this about their guests, but genuinely one of my favorite wrestlers growing up watching wrestling during the Ruthless Aggression era, especially. Former two-time Ring of Honor tag team champion, former three-time WWE tag team champion, as one half of the self-proclaimed world's greatest tag team. He is, of course, the one and only Mr. Charlie Haas. Charlie, man, how's it going? Thank you for joining me.
It's going good, and thank you for having me. And I'd like to apologize to everybody for not hooking up with you sooner. And it's all on me, and I'm glad we could do this. So please, I'm looking forward to this.
No, man, of course. Like I said, it's difficult when it's US to UK, figuring out time zones. I think there's 3 different time zones just in Eastern US. Like some guests are 4 hours behind me, some are 5, some are 6. It's really...
We have Eastern, Central, Rocky, and Pacific, so 4, yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest time difference of any guest I had was 10 hours behind me. I think that was that Canadian time maybe, or Mexican time?
That may be going over Hawaii, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it might have been Hawaii. Yeah, something like that. It's crazy. We're not even that far. We're literally just over the other side of the water. It's not even that.
I love traveling to England to wrestle because it's like you said, it's like an 8-hour flight, maybe.
Yeah.
And it's I just go to sleep, wake up. It's great. But no, I mean, I've really had some of the best times I've been in England, whether it's wrestle for WWE or for Charlie Rage had a promotion I used to wrestle for out there. He'd bring me in. So it was.
Yeah, lots of pretty much every guest I've spoken to that's been to the UK, they all say the same thing. Always say that we've got the best crowds, that they love coming over here. It's just a shame we don't get it very often, especially at the minute. With COVID and coming out of COVID and stuff, it's been hard.
No, I understand it, but you're right. The crowds are the best. You guys bring the spirit of when you guys are at the football games. We don't have that. You guys have the cheers, the songs, and that's what we love coming about. So
it's because every event's like WrestleMania or the Super Bowl for us, because we don't get it very often. When we do get it, we just go all out. We just go all out and enjoy it as much as we can. But yeah, no, like I said, man, thank you so much for joining me. One of the first things I wanted to ask you about is actually something that's obviously just recently happened. I mentioned in the intro there that you spent time in Ring of Honor. I think you were there for a few years. You were there alongside Shelton Benjamin as well. What do you make of what's just happened to Ring of Honor? Obviously, we've had some really sad news the last few days. Basically, all of the roster's been released. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's sad, man, because I firmly believe that this is the best time to be a wrestler and a wrestling fan. With internet, with the pandemic, everybody was starting to cut the cords and using internet TV, which I never thought would take off, but it took something like the pandemic to hit, and so everything's like internet TV took off, like Pluto, Plex, Crackle, and we're getting and with those channels that I've just mentioned, a few of them. You have like Fight Network that's being displayed. Yeah. And then on top of that, you got every promotion that's out there that has their own wrestling station now. Like PC Ultra, there's MLW, there's AAA, there was Ring of Honor, Impact, NWA, and there's I see there's a federation that wrestles like in a bar in England that we see over here all the time. So I'm not sure which one it is, but it's like not much room. It's just like there's the bar, and you just see one side of it, and they just go at it. But anyways, what I was trying to get to is that there is plenty of, there's plenty of channels out there now, and they need content. So a lot of these wrestling promotions are picking up. They're picking up their production. They're meeting the demand of the TV. They're meeting the specs that they have to meet, and they're being produced at a high level, and it looks really good. So it's giving all the wrestlers from all over the world a different platform to perform in, and to hone their craft, to learn how to work in front of a crowd, so that they can make it to the WWE or AEW, it's sad because that's good for all of the for all those other promotions. the pandemic was bad for Ring of Honor, because Ring of Honor was owned by Sinclair Broadcasting, which is it's a major television company or multimedia company, but they rely on the cable, and they rely on what they do. They have syndicated TV, so all the antennas that they own, that's where Ring of Honor would play at, and they would have to go out and they would broadcast, as far as those antennas would reach. But with the pandemic and people cutting the costs, people weren't sponsoring, or they weren't paying for ads, and that's how those companies make money. So for 18 months, they had, they didn't have any type of production or anything for the wrestling, but they were able to keep the wrestlers afloat, and so they were able to keep the wrestlers. They were able to keep the wrestlers, healthy, and they're able to pay them. But it finally caught up to where it hurt them in the long run. So
yeah, and like you say, you've got to take your hats off to Ring of Honor, because they could have just gone on a hiatus, couldn't they? They didn't have to keep paying everybody. They didn't have to keep putting out a product, but they put out a great product. But like you said as well, there are so many avenues now, so many different promotions, whether they be smaller promotions or the sort of like the top 4 or 5. There's so many places. I've already spoken to a few guys from Ring of Honor, and they've already started picking up like indie bookings and like smaller shows. So they're all going to be fine. There's a lot of very, very talented people in Ring of Honor.
And a lot of these companies are working with each other. Like AEW is working with Impact, and Impact MLW, and so they're all working together. So, and people can make a living now. Not like they're not making millions, but they're able to live, and so they'll be fine. There's some great talent there. I'm working for some promotions. We'd like to bring the Briscoe brothers in, or Jay Lethal, or Kenny King, just to name a few. So.
Yeah, man, absolutely, 100%. They'll all be fine. I'm sure. So right, let's move on to what I think it's safe to say most people tend to remember you for your time in WWE. You were in WWE for quite a few years. Very fondly remembered for your time tagging with Shelton Benjamin, like I said at the start there, and alongside Kurt Angle as well as part of Team Angle. So when you first, I know you were sort of like doing your training and you did a few matches here and there, but then you just hit the main roster and you were straight into a program alongside the likes of Kurt Angle, alongside guys like Brock Lesnar, Chris Benoit, if I remember rightly as well. What was that like for you? Because you don't, like I say, people didn't know who you were. You just burst onto the scene and you were wrestling alongside all of these top names in a really prominent position, pretty high up the card as well.
Well, before that, I was on the independents for about 5 years, and my brother and I were. So we're the Haas brothers, and WWE signed both of us. And Team Angle was supposed to be Russ, my brother Russ, myself, Shelton, and Kurt. And then my brother died. So that's why Russ and I were we were probably one of the best tag teams brother-wise. And we were held the Jersey All-Pro and the CZW titles on the independents at the same time. This is right before Ring of Honor even started. We broke in low-key, Bryan Danielson, all them on the indies. So we had a good name, a good reputation. Jim Kettner, who started the Super 8, polished us up and got us ready for WWE. We were supposed to hit it sooner, and then my brother died, so it kind of put everything on hold for about a year. And then once Shelton and I, Vince wanted Shelton and I to be trained by Arn Anderson to click, to make it, to make us the world's greatest tag team, or to make Team Angle legit. Because I don't know if you ever seen any matches with my brother and I, but it was like Shelton and I. But where Russ was the acrobat or the athlete like Shelton is, and I was like the pounding ground on the just that. So.
What was it like then being paired with Kurt Angle straight away? Because obviously he was already even at that stage, he was already a legend. He was already sure to be a Hall of Famer. How did he help you guys to develop? And I know you'd already been wrestling for a good 5 or so years, but how did he get you in sort of like that WWE frame of mind, that TV frame of mind?
Well, a lot of that has to. I have to thank Jim Cornette for that. When we were at OVW at the Developmental League, we're doing TV. And also, I was in Memphis too with Jerry Lawler at the Memphis Championship Wrestling, another developmental league. So we were doing live. It was live right there. It wasn't live to tape. It was live. So whatever you said or whatever you did was going live right there. So we had a good 2 years of experience of working in front of TV, how to work the crowd, how to know when the commercials are coming in, knowing when to go home. So they really have you prepared, and they would, if they didn't think you were prepared, they wouldn't put you on TV. But Kurt and I, to answer your question, Kurt and I go back, since college. He was Olympian, man, and I was an amateur wrestler, and I was always wanted to aspire to be like him. This had nothing to do with pro wrestling; it was just the amateur. Yeah. And so I'm from the state of Oklahoma, which is wrestling's God there, and amateur wrestling is, and he's from Pennsylvania, and that's another state, Penn State and Oklahoma State, and they're two of the heavy hitters when it comes to amateur wrestling. So there's always a good rival. But Kurt and I have always been good friends, and man, he was like a mentor. He would just teach you he knew we had the work ethic because of our amateur background. We knew who we were, but he just how to slow down, how to pace, when to turn it up. So he was able to coach us and pass that knowledge on to Shelton and I.
Yeah, and how about that time with Shelton? Because like you say, Arn Anderson trained you guys, and you guys just had so much chemistry. You looked like you would wrestle together literally your whole lives. It was just magic. What was Shelton like to work like? And I'd be interested to know, what do you make of the way that Shelton's been used in the last few years? Because he came back to WWE, straight back into another tag team with Chad Gable, very similar to yourself, similar sort of style. And he's not really been used particularly well the last few years, has he? Are you still in touch with Shelton?
Yeah, he's my best friend, and we talk all the time. He's the godfather to my daughter. He's my best man of my. He is, he's getting paid, so he survived the cuts. But they have other plans for him. I think in the future he'll probably be an instructor or a coach, especially with them signing all the amateur wrestlers from Gable Steveson that won the Olympic gold medal for us from the University of Minnesota. And a few others like the Steiner's son, and there's a couple others that they've signed. And they may use Shelton to, when they decide it's time for him to retire to coach, if he wants to. I think I'm happy for Shelton. I wish they would have ran with the hurt business and kept it going instead of breaking it up and then bringing it back. They had a lot of momentum, and they really helped the company during the pandemic. So I was really hoping. I was happy to see him and Cedric back on TV. And I mean, I just want the best for him because he deserves it. I'd like to see him have a singles run. I'd love to see him get the world championship. That way it would definitely be that. It'd be an extra feather in his cap, and it would definitely guide him towards the Hall of Fame. I think we talked that.
Yeah, I think even without it, he's surely going to be in the Hall of Fame. And I'm not just saying this again because you're here, but growing up, he was one of my favorite wrestlers, one of the best athletes that I think the company has ever had, in terms of what he could do and his athleticism in the ring. And even now, even at his age now, what's probably early 40s, I would imagine.
Yeah, he's like mid 40s. He's 44, but he is he's a tremendous athlete. The difference is now that back when we were wrestling, he really never worked out. It was just that God gifted. Now that he's older, he's working out. But now he's even better. So.
Yeah, and he's definitely, like you say, if he can pass that knowledge and experience on to the future when he eventually retires, I think he's got a job for life, surely, in WWE as a trainer or a coach or an agent or whatever it might be. There's not many people better suited to that than Shelton. So obviously I've talked about the fact that you tagged with Shelton. That's what people most fondly remember you for. But you've also tagged with the likes of Hardcore Holly, Viscera, Mike Knox, Rico, some really bizarre names, like not the type of names that I would have associated with you. You also had a few singles runs, but WWE always seemed to put you back into tag teams. Was that something that did you ever feel any frustration for that? Did you want to have more of a single run to show what you could do?
I think they signed me as a tag team specialist. We proved it with Shelton and I, Rico and I. I think they I think that's what they saw me in. They didn't sign Charlie Haas. They signed Charlie Haas and Russ Haas, the Haas brothers. And when Shelton and I were split, and then Rico and I split, I kept going back into tag teams, which is fine because that's what I'm good at. I feel comfortable with. It wasn't until I got to when I was over in Japan or on the independents that man, I started feeling comfortable in the as singles. It's totally two different styles, totally two different what do you call not styles, but psychologies. The psychology is totally different. And I really felt, and I finally figured it out that when I wasn't a tag team, I was like, oh man, okay, now I'm singles. I got to come up with all these new moves, a finisher. I got to be, everyone. I can't do flips. I can't do acrobats. I'm just, there's so much pressure on you. And then I'm saying, Arn Anderson told me, he's like, Charlie, why don't you just quit worrying about the moves and just worry about the work in between? You're going to get it. And that finally clicked. Of course, it was after WWE, but that's the truth. And that's what, if anything, like I'm opening up a wrestling school and like I'm coaching my kids. I have an amateur wrestling school, but I tell the people that I mentor or that I'm working angles with on the indies that, hey, don't worry about the moves. It's the work between the moves, how to get there, how you interact with the crowd. Don't worry about A through Z. Just try to go out there and call it off the fly. And, it's pro wrestling. It's supposed to look like a fight. It's not going to look pretty, so.
Yeah. So I didn't know that you had a school that you were doing training.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you just started recently? Have you been doing it for a while?
I've had the amateur wrestling school for a good 5 or 6 years. We're one of the top teams in the country. It feeds into the high school, Allen High School, which is just won their 12th straight state title. And then out of that, my kids, my sons wanted to get into pro wrestling. So that's why I got back into it. And so my wrestling school, which will be with the amateur wrestling school, it's going to open up at the end of November. And I'm going to specialize in tag team wrestling. I'm going to try to teach the heels to go back to, that's the problem is I look at the tag teams today. The heels want to out wrestle the baby faces. They want to have their moves to be flashy and fancy. The greatest tag team ever is Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard. And you can't even tell me what was one double tag team move or what was one tag team move that they did together that was double. There wasn't one I can think of, but they knew how to work body parts. They knew how to cut off the ring. They knew how to get heat. They knew the psychology, but they weren't out there trying to outshine the baby faces. And I think that's what's lost today in tag team wrestling. So I was fortunate to have Gerry, Briscoe, and Arn Anderson, coach me with the tag team. So I have that knowledge to pass on. But so the pro school will be opening up it's going to be opening up at the end of the month. So.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Like you say, Arn Anderson. It doesn't really get much better than that. If you want to be trained in tag team wrestling, it really doesn't get any better than Arn. You're right about tag team wrestling. Like it's what got me into wrestling. It was around TLC 2 sort of time, Mania 17, when I really got into wrestling. Tag team wrestling just appealed to me, and it's just, I don't even know what it is anymore. There's hardly any tag teams left. They just, especially if you're talking just WWE, there's a lot in AEW. They do it really well. I think sometimes they've got a bit too much going on in the tag division. You get too many 5v5 matches. WWE, man, even if you look at the women's tag scene, there's one women's tag team and they're the champions. There are no other tag teams because they're obsessed with just splitting teams up. I don't get it. It's like Vince doesn't see money in tag teams.
Here's what Vince. Here's what we were told towards the end when they split Shelton and I up. Vince doesn't like tag team wrestling. He looks at it as an added expense, as you're paying for an extra guy on the road, an extra guy in the hotel room. He really doesn't like it. And he changed a lot of it where it used to be you'd have two guys bumping and feeding for the comeback. You only wanted one guy. He changed. He really changed it. And a lot of people, Arn threw his hands up in the air. Arn's like, man, this is like, I know it better than anyone. I was trained by Ole and Gene. He goes, so I guess you've been telling me all these years that we've been doing it wrong. So when the agents, like him, have one of the greatest minds in the business, and he's like, what is going on? Then you start wondering what is going on. You're right though. There's been, when you're talking about 2002 with the tag teams, I think that was a great time. And I think before that, if you go, and this is going back way before you, but when I was a kid growing up in the 80s, I got to watch Arn and Tully Blanchard, the Rock and Roll Express, the Midnight Express, the Fantastics, the Fabulous Ones, the Guerreros, the dynamic duo, Chris Adams, Gino Hernandez. and they were all over. Like you'd see those different territories, Mid South, World Class, USWA, Georgia Championship Wrestling, World Championship Wrestling, and those tag teams meant something, you know. Yeah. And then, fast forward to 2002, then you had, the Dudleys, the Hardys, Edge and Christian, the New Age Outlaws. If I'm forgetting anyone, I'm sorry, but those are great tag teams. And then you go to ECW, you had the Eliminators, you had the Dudley Boys there, you had the Gangsters, you had who else did you have? I'm forgetting Public Enemy. You had some tag teams, and it meant something, just like Ring of Honor, their tag teams meant something. When I felt when we were there, we wrestled Kings of Wrestling, that's how passionate I love the tag team stuff. And, I was a fan of it before I became one.
Yeah. And what's mad is if you just think back, 35 years, it main evented WrestleMania, a tag team match main event. So Vince obviously knew that there was something about it. And then just as time has gone on, I don't know. It's just weird that it's almost like, was there one thing that changed his mind? I don't know. It's strange. It's bizarre, very bizarre. To touch on your singles runs again, I had to make a little list because there were so many. John Cena, JBL, JR, The Great Khali, MVP, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Bret Hart, Mr. Perfect, Jimmy Snuka, Roddy Piper, Undertaker, Hogan, and even Beth Phoenix. All the different people that you impersonated. That was a really fun period where you were impersonating different wrestlers and coming out and doing your thing. How did that come about? Was that something that you pitched it? Was it somebody else backstage? Did you have much involvement?
It was Johnny Ace, John Laurinaitis pitched it. Character you always wanted to see. I don't know if they were setting me up to fail for it or whatever, trying to get me out of there, but I embraced it. Like, man, you know what? They told me who I was going to be. Nice, man. I went out and I studied. I got all the stuff. And I tried to honor them. I didn't want to make fun of them. I wanted to honor those heroes. And that's what I tried to do.
Yeah, you always seem to be having fun. That's what I'll say. You always looked like you were having fun when you did it. Were you given much freedom in just, like you say, go out and do whatever you wanted to do, or was it quite involved from Johnny or Vince or anybody?
They gave me freedom. They wanted to see if I was going to drop the ball or sink or swim. But I wanted to slam me with it. I wanted for the Haas, whatever it was called, the Glamour Haas or whatever. But no, it was. I enjoyed it, man. If you can't make fun of yourself, who can you make fun of? So.
Yeah, exactly. You got to laugh at yourself, absolutely. Especially in wrestling. Like I said, I really enjoyed that period. I really did. I want to go back to Ring of Honor a bit. I know we talked about it right at the start, and we've mentioned it a few times. You were there for about 3 years, again with Shelton, winning the tag bouts twice, like I said. What was your time there like, and how did it compare to being in WWE? Because obviously this was at a time where Ring of Honor wasn't really taken seriously. The last few years up to the present day, they became more of a force and they had a wave of momentum behind them. But back then they were just seen as sort of like a bush league. So what was it like going from the sort of like the big dogs down to a company like Ring of Honor who do things very differently?
Well, it was like a breath of fresh air because Jim Cornette was there and he was writing it. He was writing everything. And he always had our backs. So he thought, he's like, man, they just released me. And then I'm like, man, I was like, man, I hope they release Shelton soon because, he deserves better. And they did. And then Cornette called us and he's like, don't sign with anybody. Because Kurt was trying to get us over to TNA to reform Team Angle because, we own the rights to our name so we could use them. So Kurt, so Jim's like, just don't do it, please. He's like, I got something big. And so our first match in Ring of Honor against the Kings Wrestling was actually Tyler Black's or, not Dean Ambrose. What's his name? Who's Tyler Black, the champion right now, or was the champion? Seth Rollins was Seth Rollins. Oh, yeah. So Tyler Black was Seth Rollins, and Seth Rollins was leaving to go to WWE. And we were coming out, and we just that was our first match. So we were on the same card together. And I wished him well. I knew he was going to be a big star. I mean, they're pretty good about, and I think Regal has his pulse on ROH a lot. So they brought Bryan Danielson in. They had success with CM Punk. They've had success with somewhat with Low-Ki, but they knew getting Tyler or Seth Rollins and Ambrose eventually that they're gonna have something special. So You're right. They were on the upstart. They were getting ready to be, if not the second best, maybe the third best. They are the third best, but I thought they were right up there and running with Impact. And at this time, Kerry Sulkin didn't sell it to, he was still the owner. He didn't sell it to Sinclair Broadcasting, Joe Koff, until about maybe 6, 7, 8 months later. So
many good names, man. And you've only touched the surface there. Like, you got Kevin Steen, you got
I'm sorry,
Adam Cole, Sami Zayn. It's just been a conveyor belt.
El Generico, Rain. Kenny King, Red Titus, All Night Express. The Briscoes. People don't understand. Like, my brother and I, we broke the Briscoe brothers in. We were their first match. You guys go to YouTube, watch Haas brothers versus the Briscoe brothers. We jumped the Briscoe brothers. We handcuffed the dad to the ring, and then I put the mom in a wrestling hall. My brother came off the top rope with an elbow on her, and the crowd went. It was in their gym. The crowd was jumping the rails. Like, they did not know what was going on. It built up to an angle to where we had the major blow off at University of Delaware, and this is an independent ECWA, Jim Kettner's ECWA, who did the Super 8. We put over 1,000 people in there for just being a small independent, and busloads of people to show up just to see them kick our ass. That's something we'll always will cherish. But that's on YouTube right now.
So we've got you guys to thank, basically, for making the Briscoe brothers one of the greatest tag teams of all time. I think the Briscoe brothers.
Oh, I definitely do. I don't know if we made them, but I think we introduced them.
You helped them. You certainly helped them on the way. Yeah. I want to touch on. You said obviously you came back out of wrestling, and you're involved with your sons who are wrestling now as well, getting into the business. So SWE Fury. I think was it after your second retirement that you came back to join SWE? Are you still current heavyweight champion?
It was my first retirement. I was like, I was done. As of right now, I'm still the current champion. So I still got the title. So
was it more SWE that made you come out of retirement, or was it so that you could work with your sons because they showed that interest?
I was with Robert Langdon. Told me, who owns Texoma Pro. He goes, "Hey, we're gonna induct you into the Hall of Fame. We need you out here." I'm like, "All right." So I went out there, and when I was out there, SWE was running that weekend, and Teddy Long and James Beard were there. And they're like, "Hey, man, we want you to come out and try SWE. We need a strong heel, and you just never were given the platform to be you." And I'm like, "Look, I'll do it." But I gotta thank Robert Langdon, because in this time before I retired, I was working just for Texoma Pro, and he gave me the platform to say what I wanted, to wrestle the way I wanted, and I never had to ask for forgiveness. I just did it and called the match I wanted. So I learned a lot and I learned exactly what Arn was talking about, the work in between. And that's what I did. For those 3 years, I would show up just late, just as the show is starting. So I wouldn't have to talk to my opponent. We just go right to the ring and wrestle so that we could. And because I'm not one of these guys like, okay, we got to go to a spot. I hate that, because if you mess up, how do you go back and fix it? I got to listen to the crowd. And because of that experience, I was able to get into SWE, and it worked. It clicked. I don't know. I mean, it was the good timing. It clicked, and because of that, we started these kids camps, and now, like, my son's 11 and 9. They're really good amateur wrestlers, but you got to see that on Hannibal TV. If you go there, you can watch their matches. Like, they're better than most of the workers on TV, and I'm not joking, man. I mean, this is unbelievable. So they work cold.
It's because they've got you training them. That's why.
Well, their mom was a wrestler too, so.
Well, yeah, of course. Was that something? I know I've spoken to a lot of wrestlers who've got kids that are sort of like showing interest. Some of them didn't or don't want their kids getting into the business. Some of them do. Did you always want yours to get involved?
No, I wanted them to go into amateur wrestling, which they are. And they're Russ is ranked number 1 in the country. He's unbelievable. Chuck's at the top. He's in the top. But I wanted them to use wrestling, amateur wrestling, to get their college paid for, to pay for their education. And that's the ultimate goal. They would go to the wrestling, they'd get in the ring, and I would be like, "All right, let's go." And they're like, "No, come on, Dad, show us." I'm like, "No." So really seriously, I use it as punishment. If they misbehave, I'm like, "You know what? We're not going to the ring tonight. There's no pro wrestling tonight." And then we're sorry. So I never really pushed them into it, but they were always around it, and they would see. And I mean, it's amazing. They're like sponges. They absorb so much, so that if you watch the matches they've had lately, you'll be like, "Man, these kids, their timing, they don't rush anything." It's like, you can tell. It's like Randy Orton told me, he goes, Charlie goes, man, he goes, I grew up watching it. I was always with my dad and my grandfather. He goes, remember when we were in OVW and it clicked for me? I was like, yeah. He goes, that's going to happen. He goes, you're just around it. It naturally happens, you know.
And that's another like the names that you're naming, the people you've learned from and the advice you've taken from someone like Randy Orton, one of the greatest of all time, still in the business now, still at the top level. And you've learned from some of the absolute best, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the ring with the Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Undertaker, Kane, Hardcore Holly, Billy Gunn, who is the best creative seller in the business. He is a natural athlete, but he creatively sells where he needs to be. I've been in the ring with Cena. I've been in Umaga. I mean, Umaga, him and I were in the development. We found my brother dead, and he became my brother. And like all those, the pop-up Samoan drop and the ass to mouth, that running into I was the guinea pig for all that. I'm the one that I was the test dummy. So when I watch Jacob Fatu, the Samoan werewolf, I almost cry because it looks like a younger Eki doing all that.
Yeah, man, absolutely. That's a hell of a family.
Yeah, I've been with Rikishi, the Tonga kid. Bradshaw, Ron Simmons. I mean, you're right. I've been blessed in the people that had trained me: Arn Anderson, Jerry Briscoe, Ricky Steamboat, Steve Kern, Fit Finley, Dave Taylor, Regal. I mean, so I have a lot of that's been passed on to me. Maybe I wasn't very successful as I wanted to be when it came to singles, but I have a lot of knowledge for tag team wrestling, which we did hit the pinnacle, and I have a lot to give to people that want to get there. And I can tell them, hey, do what I didn't do, and that you'll probably be successful. So
yeah, and like I always think, like it doesn't. Championship bouts are great, and being at the top of the card is great, but there's been so many Hall of Famers that weren't world champions. Like you don't need to have held every title 10 times over to be one of the greats. Like you said, you will probably go down as one of the great tag teams of WWE. You're always in the lists. You're always in like top 10 lists. Like I said, you were one of my favorite teams growing up. You don't have to have all of the gold, all of the belts, all of the money, all of the accolades to be a great. That's what I think anyway.
Thank you. I appreciate
it. To touch back on, obviously we've mentioned amateur wrestling quite a bit and college wrestling. I know that you were a high level college wrestler, and a lot of those guys, especially these days, tend to go down the MMA path, the UFC path. That wasn't so well. It was popular, but obviously UFC is at massive heights that it was never at in the sort of like mid 2000s. Would you have gone down that path maybe if they were more popular? I know Kurt Angle himself has said that he wishes that it was, he would have loved to have done it if it was a bigger deal at the time. Would you have ever gone down that route?
Would I have tried it? Probably, yes. Because I love that combative spirit. And, in amateur wrestling, man, it's only you out on the mat, But I was such a fan of pro wrestling. That's why I got into amateur wrestling. So I probably would have tried both and stuck with whatever I was better at. But at the time, like you said, UFC wasn't even, what's his name? The Farida brothers did not buy it yet. It was still, it was still up for sale. Pride was just ending. And the Monday Night Wars was the hottest thing. So wrestling is where you wanted to be. It was the coolest thing at the time. And I always wanted to be it. So, and ECW was hot, WCW and WWF at the time. So and I was out on the East Coast wrestling, and the independents were smoking out there. So yeah, I mean, we came in at the right time for pro wrestling. And if I wanted to be a UFC fighter, it would have been a pioneer, like, probably like, what's his name? Randy Couture or, the people that really paved the way for the UFC.
Yeah. Yeah. And hopefully it would have gone a bit better than CM Punk when he tried. It doesn't always work out, does it?
No, but you know what? I got to tell you though. He took people can say whatever they want, but he changed, he never wrestled. He never was in a combative sport. Yeah. He wanted to be a pro wrestler, but for him to change gears and change avenues to do what he did and to put the time in, to go out there knowing that it was against all odds, where this kid's probably been training, jiu-jitsu or wrestling or Muay Thai since he was little, it says a lot about his his fortitude. It says a lot about his fortitude. My hat's off to him, because anybody get in the ring to fight at that high of a level, I mean, you know what? I mean, you got to be a tough son of a bitch. So I'm happy for him.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Like, how many people on Twitter that made fun of him would have actually done it themselves? I wouldn't.
Right. I never made fun of him, so I wanted him to succeed. I just, MMA, the foundation of MMA is amateur wrestling. It's because it all ends up on the ground, and you can take a really good amateur wrestler and turn him into a decent mixed martial artist. Just Johnny Hendricks, who went to my high school, a big rig Johnny Hendricks, good friend of mine. We have the same high school coach. He was UFC champion, 3-time All-American or national champion at Oklahoma State. So, there's Kurt Angle, he'll testify that, there's a lot of good amateur wrestlers out there that, that did make it, Bellator, UFC or whatever. But now it's starting to swing this way. Gable Steveson won the Olympic gold medal, University of Minnesota heavyweight national champion, which is going back for his second national title. And, he just signed with a multi-million-dollar deal. So they're saying it's in the range of $25 million over 7 years. His brother signed. Won a D2 national title signed. And there's a brother tag team too. One of them wrestled for University of Duke, who signed. So, people are saying, you know what, man, we can make some big money wrestling pro. So maybe they're going to get away from WWE and they're going to head this way. So, they're going to get away from UFC and head this way.
Yeah. Very good wrestler, Gable Steveson. What do you think his chances in WWE are like? Because obviously with the WWE machine behind him, surely he's going to be a big deal. Like, he's obviously got the skills, but have you ever spoken to him? Do you know him at all? Have you ever interacted with him? I don't know. Has he got any sort of like charisma or?
The good thing is he's a fan. He's been a fan his whole life.
Yeah.
We always thought Shelton, Brock, and I, and Kurt, who paved the way. Guys like he went to University of Minnesota because Brock and Shelton went there, and they have a lineage of heavyweight. The heavyweights to go there become national champions. Shelton was the heavyweight before Brock. He coached Brock. He took third twice. Brock won the national title. Gable Steveson won the national title. That's where the heavyweights go if they want to be a national champion. And that's because of Marty Morgan, who's the coach that helps them, and Brandon Magan, the head coach there, who was Shelton's roommate in college. He's a hell of a wrestler. He was a national champion. So he's built a really good program off the back of Jay Robinson. But now there's a chance for everybody to amateur wrestlers to get a chance to shine on the pro field, the pro level. Now, will they all make it? I don't know. But I think Gable Steveson will. Yeah, because he's a fan. He's very well spoken. And he's athletic as all get out. He can do standing backflips. And he's got the work ethic too. And he's a big guy.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Big things on the horizon for him. I'm excited to see what they do. A lot of people are obviously already saying, oh, he's just going to be the next Kurt Angle. That's fine. If you want to make another Kurt Angle, I don't think he'll be against being the next Kurt Angle, one of the greatest of all time. Like, that's fine.
No, you know what? And he's the type that will, he'll honor Kurt, but he's going to want to be himself.
Yeah.
He's going to want to.
Of course, absolutely, man. Right, so I want to finish off by asking you about what you're up to at the minute. I noticed in the last couple of weeks that you've started your own podcast, the Haas Pod.
Yes,
what can you tell us about that? Because I know you've got a couple of co-hosts there, haven't you? I think your first guest was Jazz and Rodney Mack.
The Jazz and Rodney. So my podcast, I want it to be different from everybody's. I have a lot of connections in the amateur wrestling along with the pro. So it'll cover all aspects of wrestling. I'm trying to bring both wrestling groups together. 1 week it's going to be pro wrestling. The next week is going to be amateur. 1 week's going to be pro, and the next week is going to be amateur. I'm going to be talking to the coaches of the head coaches of the top, like Iowa, University of Minnesota, Penn State, Oklahoma State. I'm going to ask them what they look at in a recruit. What type of athlete are they looking for? Do they want someone that's clicking, or do they want somebody that's rough around the edges that they can mold into that brand? And then I'll go down to the high school level, and I'll talk to the coaches. how do you keep these kids motivated for 4 years and keep the grades up to make sure they got to hit that SAT mark and those standards on their grades for them to get accepted to those colleges, you know? And I'll talk to the Ivy League schools, you know, because they're really trying to, you know, they got some great programs, but it's very hard to get in. And then I'll go back and I'll be talking to the pro wrestlers, you know, my mentors, amateur wrestlers that became pro wrestlers, you know, basketball players became pro wrestlers, football players. But, you know, and we'll talk about the stories we had, you know, and the good times, and also dive into being on the independents for 5 years at Jersey All Pro and CZW, and, you know, bringing in the Briscoe brothers and playing the tapes. Remember when we did this? Remember that? And you know, and letting people know about, you know, how I went through you know, I broke in with Low Key and the Hit Squad and Samoa Joe, and, you know, the Charlie Haas they didn't know about, and introduced them to Charlie and Russ Haas, the Haas brothers that they never saw, and I got all those tapes to play. So, and you know, I got my work cut out for me. But in the same time, I'm going to be bringing along the Junior Wrestling Association. It's the new association that'll be with my school, but it's going to be concentrated for kid wrestling from 10 years old to 15. I'm going to teach the kids how to pro wrestle, but they won't go outside the ring. They won't go off the top turnbuckle. There'll be no power bombs or any type of spine busters where it's going to give them a whiplash. I'm going to try to protect them. But I want them to learn if they want to be a pro wrestler, why not start when they're young? Learn the timing, learn how to work in front of a crowd. And if you guys go and watch my two kids, I think I've done a pretty good job, you know, at that age.
Yeah, man, that sounds really cool. I genuinely like the sound of that, like a bit of a different perspective. Like off the top of my head, there are a million wrestling podcasts and it's hard to break through, but I don't think there's any that really cover, or certainly not many that cover amateur wrestling and college wrestling. So that could be quite an interesting listen. I will definitely check it out. When's the first episode? Is that being released, the one with Jazz?
We did Rodney and Jazz last night. That's going to air today or tomorrow. And then I got Rick Delegato, the head of the New York Athletic Club. He was a 4-time U.S. Open champion. He was a 3-time All-American at University of Kentucky. He is going to be my first guest for an amateur. He is very well regarded. He was a 2-time Olympian, and you know, he's on the USA board of wrestling. So he's going to talk to us about what they look like, what they do after college when they want to prepare them for the Olympics. And because the New York Athletic Club, they sponsor the most Olympians for the U.S. team this year. And they had, most of the New York Athletic Club members, or those team members, were Olympian place winners, either silver, bronze, or gold. And, you know, so he's going to tell us like what is so different and how they train at a different level. We're in college, we're always thinking 3 moves ahead. And then at the Olympic level, it's 5 to 6 moves ahead, and how you have to be right on. So it's going to be a different perspective in what they look at. So I'm looking forward to that. And, you know, and it's like I said, I got my work cut out for me, but it's going to be fun. So.
Yeah, man. Honestly, it sounds really interesting. Sounds really good. So that was, is it the Haas pod?
It's the Haas pod. Wrestling's greatest podcast. So.
Wrestling's greatest podcast. Make sure you check that out, guys. Charlie, before I let you go, is there anything else you want to push? Anything going on with SWE at the moment? Any big shows coming up?
Then right now, SWE I guess is on hold. I'm working for you know, Rodney Mack and Jazz. They have their pound for pound, the dog pound. It's a hell of a promotion down in San Antonio. And you know, right now I'm just wherever I go, my 2 kids go with me. I just get them in the ring so they get experience. They're usually opening up the card for everybody, and that's taken off. And man, it's you know what, it's just good to be back, and it's man, it's good to see my friends again. You know, Carlito and you know, I've been working with Kevin Sullivan. It's an honor to work with him. A great mind in the business. He's actually teaching me how to book, since he's the last living link to Eddie Graham, who's one of the greatest bookers ever. So right now I'm really working on the aspects after wrestling, you know, and building a future. So. Very
cool, man. Charlie, thank you so much for joining me, man. We've been trying to sort this out for a while. I'm glad we managed to finally do it. I really appreciate your time. Guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Really appreciate you doing that as well. You know where to find me. It'll all be at the top of the screen here, all in the bio as well. I'll drop in some links for everything that Charlie's been talking about, like the Haas pod, everything going on with SWE as well, and his social media links. It's been a blast. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you again, Charlie. Oh, Yeah, man. Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure talking to you, man. And until next time, guys, we'll see you again on It's My Wrestling Podcast.